Welcome back to another episode of the C.I.C.
Lounge. C.I.C. Lounge.
Welcome back to another episode of the C.I.C. Lounge.
If this were a real C.I.C., there'd be like screens and consoles and switches and dials and...
We have time to evolve.
Oh, I would love to build a set.
That would be
like,
dope.
A real actual set.
Hey.
Well, if we get more viewers and...
If we actually get some money.
That'd be awesome. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
And we're talking about Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 1.
The Broken Circle.
The Broken Circle.
I was super excited. I think it was actually you that got me into Strange New Worlds, Season 1. I was interested in it, but I was not super excited about it. I watched, what was it, Discovery, and finished all, 3 seasons of that show? 4 seasons of that show?
There's 4.
4 seasons?
There's one more coming.
Oh, there is one more coming.
There is one more coming.
Okay. Well, okay.
Yeah, we can talk about Discovery another time.
But getting into Captain Pike and the crew of the Enterprise before we have Captain Kirk, I thought it was fun. So I got into it and finally watched the last of the first season a couple weeks ago, and so we've been super excited about getting to watch Season 2, Episode 1, and do our review on it. So a few days late, my fault, obviously.
Everything's your fault.
I had to decide to go, cross the country and see my nephew. Ugh, little bastard.
So my understanding is when they pitched Strange New Worlds, they're like, let's just do Star Trek. Like, not some grand high concept idea for a show. It's just let's just do Star Trek, kind of like how it was done in the 60s.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's probably why I like Strange New Worlds as the latest iteration of the Star Treks. It's my favorite of the new stuff because it doesn't try to be anything other than Star Trek.
Yes.
Having said that, though, they do take some creative licenses with the characters.
Quite a bit.
And there were some things I found really amusing in this episode. I like the direction that they've taken with Spock, playing more with Spock's humanity, his human side, his emotions. And, in the scene we first see Spock in this episode, he's in medical, and he's worried about his judgment and his emotions. And then at the first opportunity, we're stealing the ship.
Yes. I'm not in control of my emotions. Let's steal the ship.
Okay.
Oh, that whole sequence with stealing the ship and how they're all like textbook stealing the ship, and I thought that was so funny. What was Commander? How is her name? Pelia? Commander Pelia, played by Carol Kane, who is
the engineer, yes,
who is in The Princess Bride. Oh my God, she is such an underrated actress, first and foremost, but her personality and how she's just like, okay, sure, there's a warp core breach, okay,
yeah,
and then the whole scene and like
vent some nacelles, let's make it a little more, release some inertial dampeners, let's kind of kick it up.
Every scene that she's in this episode, she steals the whole scene. Like, she's fantastic.
I think she knows that.
Oh, she has to.
So we'll get right into one of the things that I had a problem with this particular episode was, so the Enterprise receives a distress call from La'an.
Yeah.
And in this distress call, it's not "please rescue me." There's a dire threat to the Federation. Not to her individually, not to whatever the hell she's doing on that planet. There's a dire threat to the Federation, and she needs the resources of Enterprise. Really, I think she could have used the resources of any ship. But she calls out the Enterprise because that's where her people are.
Of course.
And, Spock brings this to Admiral April, and he's like,
no.
Nope. Now, the episode opens with Pike doing his captain's log monologue, and he says that he indicates that the Admiralty seems to be preoccupied with something. And I would think, and by the end of the episode, we kind of figure out what they're preoccupied with.
Spoiler alerts for everybody.
Obviously. So, if there's a threats to the Federation,
You might want to take
just
a
a
little more notice.
just go take a peek.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, maybe not send the Enterprise, maybe send some kind of covert class ship. You gotta have them, right? Like,
Yeah.
you gotta have some ship that's not readily identifiable. Oh, that's a Federation starship, just to kind of maneuver in.
I mean,
kind of scout out what's going on, assess the threat.
In Discovery, didn't they have like Section 31 stealth ships and whatnot?
Sure. Like,
I mean, they were run by AI, but they still have the technology to build those ships and man them.
right. You
So
know, like,
send one of those out.
so I don't think it's unreasonable. You have this colony that has both humans and Klingons. Okay, I get it right now. The Klingons are running the show.
Yeah.
But the Federation does have an interest in that planet, and it's not unreasonable for a Federation starship to show up, even when they're off watch, to say, hey, we got a call, something's going on, mind if we take a look around, or maybe you can take a look around. Like, there was no reason to say no to Spock.
No.
They just wanted him to steal the Enterprise as part of an action-building plot device, and I'm like, really? And the other thing is that Spock's in command of the Enterprise.
Yes.
Operational command of a starship. He doesn't have specific orders to do anything. He has the authority to kick off the inspectors. He doesn't need to simulate a warp core breach. He can just say, get off my ship, and they have to go. Like, that's how the hierarchy and the chain of command works. It's his ship. It's under his authority. He never and they make a big deal of it because Pike turns command over to Spock. It's not in the hands of the yards. It's still operationally under Spock's command. So Spock can blow the docking clamps and pull out unless he's specifically ordered not to by April. So another way around it would have just been, don't ask for permission, just blow the blow the locks and go.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Exactly. So, but that would have cut like 20 minutes out of the episode.
Yeah. And there wouldn't have been as much suspense and drama.
And really, I think it was more of a comedic aspect because you have the engineer coming aboard saying, yeah, you're not really doing it right. Try this.
Try doing this.
Methanus cells. Sell it. Really live into it, you know?
I hope that they keep her on this season. I don't want her to be like a principal character, but I want to see more of her. Like,
my understanding is that she is the engineer at least for the season.
Oh, good.
So she should be making more appearances.
I think she's hilarious. Like, she's gonna bring some levity to this season.
Oh, definitely.
I did like. So what always drove me nuts about every scene where a ship leaves dry dock or space dock and then flies off, takes on to warp. It doesn't matter where they're going in the Alpha Quadrant, they go straight out and poof, they're gone.
Yes.
This scene, they pulled out and they flipped up and they took off. And that made me so happy.
3 dimensions.
The universe is in 3 dimensions.
It's not a 2-dimensional plane. It's brilliant.
And that, like, the whole, like, the first scene in this episode, the camera angle is you're coming down the space station and you're following and being followed by, I'm assuming they're drones, repair drones. And then you see a shuttle coming, and that kind of goes around the backside of the Enterprise as it's being worked on, which was really cool. But what you find out from this whole sequence is that you're coming up from the bottom of the space station, even though it looks like you're coming from the top down. So I thought that was really cool. The way that they had the camera angles, the way that they, depicted everything in a 3-dimensional space. Because that's what we are in.
Yes, and the things that they can do visually today versus when we've seen Star Trek in the past. But then to really capitalize on the whole entirety of the space.
Ugh.
Yeah.
So nice to see that.
So, like, I have zero complaints about the visuals and the production design, production value, quality that's coming out of all of the Star Treks at this point. Like, set design, scene design, costume. Well, it's okay, maybe some wardrobe could be tweaked to make it more practical. I'm still not happy with the uniforms really lacking pockets.
Oh, yeah, the pockets. For you, it's always the pockets. I liked the outfits that they were all wearing, like, when they went to the planet.
Yes.
The outfits
that
were awesome.
they do take a little bit of license when it comes to like away team apparel.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. But you see like the engineer character walking around with like a fanny pack to hold her whatever tool, and it kind of just looks silly. But they have to, conform to within the skin tight wardrobe that Gene Roddenberry wanted back in the original series.
Well, because we got to make sure that every woman out there is.
You got to see every curve, every line.
Well, I mean, Jen Bush. Damn. That nurse.
Speaking of nurse.
Hello, nurse.
Phenomenal performance.
Oh, she's a great actor. I think she's absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to seeing her in movies and other shows. But
the nuance in all of Nurse Chapel's scenes, and she is so compelling in everything. And we see her with the doctor primarily in this episode. And the airlock scene.
Oh my God.
Like, I was like, wait a second, she's supposed to be Spock's love interest, but like...
Oh, I know. I was like, y'all about to kiss?
And I'm like... I turned to my husband when we were watching this. I'm like, did I miss something? Like,
I know. I was like, should I rewind this? What happened?
But it was like brilliant because it was all in the performance, Yeah. I don't know what was scripted, but...
Well, I want to learn. I really hope that we dive into their story in this season at least a little bit more, because there's clearly a huge history behind those two. I mean, she goes over and checks on him. They've been captured by the Klingons or the separatist party, I'm assuming at this point. And he's having a kind of a mental breakdown because of the Klingon Federation war. There's something there that happened that we only get little snippets of, and then to see her checking on him, so clearly there's something going on. They have a past. It might not be romantic, but it's definitely, they have worked together on something, and I think maybe they've had like some Black Ops training. I think there's a lot more to these two than meets the eye.
Oh, I think so, because like in that airlock scene right before, he's like, we've faced worse, and she's like, no, we haven't. But that, again, her performance, when she says that line, like, you feel it.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You totally feel it in that moment, and I adore moments like that, particularly in Star Trek, because as much as Discovery is all about crying, it comes off as melodramatic and not sincere. And this felt like she really believes she's going to die and this is it, and this is not how she wants to go out.
And okay, so working towards that scene, I thought it was awesome, but I also had some questions on the serum that they take, the super soldier serum that they take.
The kryptonite juice or whatever, yeah.
So they take, both the nurse and the doctor take an injection. Okay, I know this is nitpicking, but they take the injection. You see the vial is now empty. They drop the hyposprays. They drop the hyposprays, and then the vials themselves hit the ground. The hypospray doesn't hit the ground. It's just the vial.
It's a random vial that's got stuff in it.
And it still has stuff in it.
It's like a third vial that just...
Where did it come from?
Okay, I had that same question when watching.
Okay, I'm not alone.
What? Okay. Well, and then they're showing like an IV drip, and I'm like, whose IV drip?
Yeah, where is this coming from? I get it. It was cool. The cinematography was kind of like, awesome and edgy, but you didn't need all that. So that's just me nitpicking on that scene, but I thought it was really cool. They get all juiced up and they go out there and they just beat the crap out of a bunch of Klingons who are physically superior and like skin's thicker and their skulls are thicker. Like, they're just a hardier species than humans. But here's what stronger, not feeling as much pain. I get faster. Okay. But does it create a denser bone structure for like 5 minutes or something, because like even afterwards when it starts to wear off and she punches one of the Klingons in the face and she's like, ow, like, okay, your hand is probably broken, your elbow is probably fractured, like,
It should be at this point, yes.
yeah, like the two of them have just beat the crap out of so many Klingons that even with your nervous system like fried for 5 minutes.
Maybe it's some kind of rapid healing Wolverine juice.
I mean, that you would think that the
May-
Federation would like.
Maybe that's within that cocktail. It's like, it's not just super strength, it's also rapid healing until it wears off and then you break your hand.
Yeah, yeah. Like that. Oh, and that kind of takes me back to like the opening sequence with the drones. It's just, I know that we as like creators of these shows, we have better technology, better CG, all the kit and caboodle, the bells and whistles, and so we can add more to the universe that we as the audience see. Mm-hmm. But the level of technology that we have on these ships and on these space stations and everything, the level of technology that these characters have to play with is so far beyond the original series technology.
Yes.
That it's almost like, are we rebooting the series or the universe, or are we stepping into a alternate universe? Like, where are we in the grand scheme of things?
I think their approach is taking what they call a creative license to manipulate but stay within general parameters of canon established by the show as much as possible. But the fact that Spock is a half human, half Vulcan was something they really didn't play with much in the 60s to the extent of as far as identity as it can be played with and addressed today. And I think that makes Spock's character more nuanced. And when we're talking about television and media in general today, we want more nuance in the characters that we see on the screen. We don't want just the action hero, the compassionate doctor, and the nerdy scientist. We want these characters to have flaws and idiosyncrasies and texture so we can see parts of them or parts of ourselves in them.
Yeah.
And so playing with Spock's emotions, and eventually Spock's going to get some sort of control back because he has to, because he has it when Kirk takes command of the Enterprise. So, but for right now, they're like, well, let's play with it and see where it goes. So how about Klingons looking Klingon again?
Yes. It's nice to see the Klingons looking like the Klingons we all know. I mean, going back to the original series, they were just kind of tan, green skinned.
They
had the bushy eyebrows.
Yeah. Well, Klingons in the original series looked very human, and they explain that actually in Star Trek Enterprise, that it was some genetic, I don't know, some weird augment thing happened. And they explained it very well. I just don't remember the exact nuances of how it was. But Star Trek Discovery, when they wanted to do the Klingon War, they reimagined the look of the Klingons, and that ticked off
a lot of people.
So many fans, because they did not look like Klingons. They didn't behave like Klingons.
No.
They spoke the language, but Star Trek had spent so many years really developing the species and the culture, and Discovery just sort of came in and reimagined them a little too far. Like, I really liked what Strange New Worlds did, because they do look a little bit different. They look like makeup has come a long way. Like the ability to change facial features and whatnot, to give the Klingons, so that each individual Klingon looks different. It's not all the same forehead mold. It's all, they're all different. Some have more defined ridges than others. And I think that adds again to that richness of the world, of the universe that the show takes place in, because you have the means now and the money, the production budget, to do that. So I was happy to see Klingons looking Klingon, drinking blood wine.
The blood wine thing. Like when we're introduced to La'an on the planet, she is now doing having a blood wine drinking competition with some Klingon, and you don't see the cups until a couple scenes later or a couple cuts later on the ground, but there's no stains on her teeth, no stains on her lips, And what's with the like dramatic reveal? Like we all know who it
Right?
is.
She sent
And
the distress call.
yeah, she sent the distress call, so we know why we're on this planet. And you do the dramatic reveal by her taking off her hood. Well, she's been we're to assume that she's been doing this drinking game with this Klingon for a matter of minutes, at least a few cups, and now she takes off her hood.
Yeah.
Like now we're getting serious. Okay, come on.
Well, I felt like they didn't explain how she had such a high tolerance for Klingon blood wine, because blood wine is supposed to be extremely potent.
Yeah.
With, and even Spock has trouble holding his liquor, So how does has Lon? As far as we know, she's human.
Well, here's I have kind of a theory and question, so I'm developing my theory, I guess. Her name is what? Laan Noonien Singh.
So
Sung.
you think she's augmented?
I think she's augmented.
That would explain it.
I mean, they say her name several times, Noonien Sung, several times. So
Yes.
it's like, who is this in the Star Trek universe?
The augmentation
we all know.
The augmentation would make sense, but we're dealing with the augment issue with the first officer, with number one,
which
with Unich and Riley. So it's like,
I literally had to watch this episode twice because like there were so many little things that were catching my interest, and I had to rewind that scene a couple of times because I'm like, wait a second, because the first officer is literally a genetically modified species, but she's not from Earth, she's from another planet,
right?
So Noonien Noonien Sung is, how do you say his name? Sung. It's
pronounced
multiple ways. Well, Khan is a genetically modified human. Yes. All of his crew were genetically modified humans. I mean, they were arrested and put on a ship in hyperspace or cryogenic stasis,
yes,
and sent out into space as punishment for trying to take over the world and for war crimes. So where does she come from? Like,
well, they haven't really said with that name Noonien Singh or Sung, however you want to pronounce it. Again, this goes back to Enterprise. Enterprise predates all of this.
Yeah.
So even Strange New Worlds takes place after Star Trek Enterprise, which makes Star Trek Enterprise canon. I know a lot of people aren't very happy about that, but season 4 of Star Trek Enterprise had a story arc where Brent Spiner came on board and played a Noonien Sung, who's into the augments, who does the genetic manipulation, who views the augments as his children and whatnot. And then, of course, he's captured, imprisoned, and he transitions to cybernetics. So La'an could be a descendant from that family lineage. She could be an augment. They haven't really said, but with that last name, it's got to come up at some point.
Yeah, so my theory is that somewhere along this season, probably near the end, to give us another big bad, because clearly, again, spoilers, clearly the Gorn are going to be the enemy of this season.
Yes.
So maybe at the end of this season, it's going to hype it up to a huge battle that they're going to need the augments to come in, or maybe next season is when the augment. One
of the things that Strange New Worlds really wanted to do was standalone episodes. They didn't want to have this like through arc because they wanted to go back to social commentary to the original Star Trek. But I see in this season already that they're laying the seeds, the groundwork for a seasonal arc. And they have to be careful because you lose people if you're trying to be one thing and then you jump and try to be another.
Excuse me, sorry.
So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that. One of the things that I was really disappointed in was the lack of Christopher Pike in this episode. Like, he's in the opening scene and he explains his exit. There's only 10 episodes in the season, and you're going to deny me Anson Mount for a whole freaking episode? Really? Really? I mean, like, you're captain of your ship?
Jen's happily married, but...
I mean, he's my command crush. So, Yes, and don't get me wrong, Unich Riley, the number one,
Beam
is
me
a
up.
is a brilliant first officer, and she wasn't there either. I'm like, these two are amazing actors and characters on the show,
Oh, they
and
have great charisma on on camera.
and again, it not having them there probably allowed a more highlighted aspects to the chapel and the doctor and Spock, so they got to have a storyline. I did feel that those two characters could have been included. Like I'm bummed that they're still playing with they haven't resolved this Unich and Riley storyline yet. Like it was the season 1 sort of cliffhanger where she's arrested and it's still not resolved yet. You know, Pike is taking a shuttle and is going to spend a day and a half going across the quadrant, and I'm assuming that's because the quadrant isn't very well explored at this point.
Yeah.
That it only takes a day and a half for him in a shuttle to get across the quadrant to talk to a lawyer.
Yeah, to go talk to a lawyer.
One lawyer. Like, in all of the vast Federation, you can't find a lawyer? Well, maybe that is a future we want to look forward to.
Yeah. Who needs all these freaking lawyers?
So.
Oh, when the whole, like, what's your thing?
I want the ship to go.
Now. Which I thought was funny. It was a cute scene, but come on, you guys. We're in a crisis mode right now. We need just go.
Yeah. My experience aboard ships is the captain gives an order and you just press the button. You confirm the order and then press you don't wait for a further acknowledge, like an engage, or punch it. Let's fly.
Vamos. Which I was like, really, you're gonna give the one Hispanic character vamos? I mean, okay, but
I mean, what more can you say? Like, Spock's pretty much left with, I would like the ship to go.
I mean, it's pretty Spock though.
It is.
And I did like how, like, he doesn't smile, but his facial expression kind of gives that smile. Like, he's excited. He's like, go now.
I would like the ship to go now. Okay. That's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah.
You could just say, follow my fucking orders.
Get the ship going,
like
bitch.
I said, set course and speed. Do it now.
Oh, before they steal the ship and they're in dry dock for repairs and inspections, and they have a bunch of people rummaging around the ship inspecting it. And what's the pilot's name? What's her name?
Not Ortega's the other one?
No, Ortega's.
Or it is Ortega's.
Yeah. So, like, the inspector is looking at her system and how it's all set up, and he's critiquing it, and she's like, yeah, I changed it because it's easier for me. And instead of going, why is that? Let me write down your notes and explain to me why it is that you've changed this, because maybe, just maybe, that might help future ships and designs. He gets all uppity. That's highly irregular. I get that it's comedic, but at the same time, it's like the Starfleet is all about absorbing new technologies and modifying and upgrading yourselves and adapting.
So here's my take on that, because I noticed that, and this was also in a book series that I read, that pilots are should be forbidden from changing the configuration of their console, because if something happens in a crisis and they are knocked unconscious or pushed out of the pilot seat and someone else has to come in and sit down, the controls need to be the same configuration, standard across the fleet, so that they're not in a crisis. Well, where thinking they're going forward, but instead they've just hit the brakes or something. So that there's a reason to have a standardized layout in a control interface for the purposes of an emergency.
Understood.
So, like, to your point, if she has a better configuration, then she should submit a change for a fleet-wide change. Or at the very least, you could do something where you have to log into the console so that it's always got your settings or preferences. But again, in a crisis, when shit hits the fan and consoles are blowing up in your face, you know,
You need to have a
you need to have
standard.
that standard configuration in combat so that everybody knows when they hit the go button, the ship goes and doesn't, self-destruct or something.
That's one thing that I mean. I totally hear that, and hearing it out loud, I understand better
Right.
now, and so I accept that. Still think maybe you should have gone. Why?
Oh, I
Instead
think
of
I'm
being
trying to
pissy
figure
about
I'm
it.
trying to figure out why these are Starfleet Academy inspectors.
yeah,
That never made any sense to me. Like,
yeah. Why was it Academy inspectors? Why isn't there a
why
set?
aren't Academy teaching at Academy?
Yeah.
Like, and just shipyard or dock workers or Starfleet mechanics doing inspections like they're supposed to.
And why is Starbase 1 orbiting Jupiter?
Who knows?
Wouldn't Starbase 1 be orbiting Earth?
Could be. Why does it have to be one? I don't know.
Oh, I just thought that was an interesting little.
It is an interesting thing. I think they have given a name to one of the star bases orbiting Earth is like McKinley Station. So, I would assume that like a starbase could have a name and a numerical designation. Not always in Star Trek. Sometimes they're just very boring. Starbase 12. I think we would name everything.
Yeah.
The only reason we haven't named the International Space Station is because we couldn't decide on a name. There was a time when we were going to name the International Space Station something other than the International Space Station.
Izzy.
Yeah. So, but every like Skylab, Mir, like we always name things.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that star bases would have names in addition to numerical designations. And I would think those numerical designations would have more to do with star system designations. If you're going to give this like star system a numeric, and then you'd have some sort of dash station 2 or 2 alpha or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's just me. I'm kind of nerdy about that sort of thing in my own writing and creations and whatnot.
Bob. Starbase Bob.
Starbase Bob. Okay.
As beautiful, like, so going back to what you were saying, like the special effects and everything, I have no complaints about that either. However, just like visually, it was stunning when the Enterprise was chasing this rogue rebuilt ship that the separate I'm just gonna call them separatists because we don't know. I mean, it's Klingons and humans and probably another species or two that are trying to start the war up again
Just so they can make a buck on this one little planet.
So the separatists have built a Federation spaceship in one of the huge caverns on this planet that has been
It doesn't
mined
have
out.
a door because it like busts through the dirt.
Yeah, it just comes out through the freaking
No
ground.
damage.
Yeah, no damage. and there's I'm assuming it's a moon that's been destroyed or something. So there's this ring of red crystals kind of orbiting the planet. There's a whole question about the gravity and all that, but that's neither here nor there. So the ship goes up into this orbit of crystals, and the Enterprise is already in this orbit of crystals, so it follows them along. There should be so much debris out there that there's no way that they could really hide in this in this orbit or the belt of crystals floating around this planet, let alone flying through it the way that they're flying through it.
Oh, yes, they can. It's called the navigational deflector dish. I'm not saying the deflector's strong enough to move every large bit of crystal, but it's supposed to move all the tiny ones so the ship's not impaled. And presumably if the ship's flying around with shields up, the shields would deflect also. So I would think that if they were doing that, though, they would draw the attention of the Klingons because suddenly the rings are not behaving in a typical fashion because something's moving through them.
Yeah, it's.
But, the Klingons are not known for being very attentive until a ship starts exploding. Hey, where'd you come from?
Yeah. I mean, but again,
Yeah.
visually it was awesome, and
sure.
how the pilot just kind of like spins around and
And
avoids.
that's all Ortega's, I mean I watched that again, like, the fancy flying and whatnot to evade fire, because the ship this ship, I'm trying to figure out, this ship doesn't know the Enterprise is there, does it? The Federation, the rogue ship, the false
It
flag.
doesn't know that the Enterprise is there until it comes out into orbit and flies through the crystal debris field.
Yeah, so the Klingons never figure it out until that ship blows up.
Yeah.
But the rogue ship finds out right away.
Right away.
And the Enterprise is supposed to be flying concealed,
yeah.
not returning fire.
And they haven't returned any fire, but how
So
the Klingons don't register the phasers
There's this
or
ship that comes up from the planet and it starts firing at something, and the Klingons are just, let's wait and see what happens. And then once it's blown up, they're like, and you were going to destroy. Well, no, we weren't going to hit. Okay.
yeah. But that was cliche Klingon,
Yeah.
because they don't want to hear what you have to say. They know the truth.
Okay.
Yeah.
But no, like that, I was watching that, and
They're the
and
Republicans of the
yes.
the galaxy.
So I was watching that sequence, and I was trying.
We just lost a bunch of viewers.
I was trying to figure out what was going on. So La'an is on the surface right before the rogue ship comes out of the ground.
Yes.
And she's like, I can't find them. They must be shielded somewhere. There must be somewhere where they're shielded.
And then,
and then it bursts out of the ground. So then I'm thinking, well, okay, if they're in a cave of some kind, that's possible that any electromagnetic signals would be concealed or shielded from the ground itself. And then I went, like, okay, well, maybe the ship has shields. And so the ship flies out into orbit, and of course the doctor and the nurse find a helmet and a jetpack, but the helmet will only activate a beacon when it's exposed to space, which seems to me a radical design flaw.
yeah.
Like, you should be able to just look inside, tinker with it, and activate the beacon from inside the airlock, but no, they have to be in open space before a random beacon will automatically signal. Okay.
There has to be suspense and drama.
Right, and so they're going to float outside the ship and activate this beacon. Are there shields or are there not shields? I never really could figure out, because if they're not shields, they really don't have to float outside. They could just open the airlock, stick the helmet out, beacon activates, and then they wait. If there are shields, they have to float out and float past the shields, assuming they could do that. I don't think you can actually float through shields. I think that's the whole point. Shields stop everything.
From the outside in, but nobody's ever talked about the inside going out.
Because, like, phasers and photon torpedoes pass through. So, like,
but isn't there like a millisecond of a moment that the shields open up in that like little spot?
Well, I would think that your weapon systems would be trained or slaved together so that if in fact you couldn't get anything in or out through a shield, it would create that opening depending on the trajectory of whatever weapon you're trying to fire. But these guys are just floating out into space. So I'm like, are they going to crash into the shield? Because they don't know about shields. They never talk about shields.
No,
but they have to be exposed to open space.
I'm assuming, this is just me. I'm just assuming that this ship was. I mean, this is a patchwork ship.
Oh, sure.
They basically just found and stole pieces of Federation ships and built this thing. How long have they been working on this? How long has the war been over? That was one thing that was bugging me. So how long did they get most of a ship and then they just patched it together? So regardless, I don't think that this ship had shields.
I don't think so either.
A deflector dish to get the small particulates out of the way, sure, but I don't think that this rogue ship had a shield.
I don't think it had shields at all, because it's like one strike from the Enterprise blew it to smithereens. You didn't see any kind of energy strike. The ship exploded. So I don't think there's any shields on this ship. Now, when they were taken to do medical things, like they were sort of taken by force, but not really. They kept all their medical gear. Did they not keep a communicator with them? Like if they
but remember they're inside the cave, and there's no communication
inside the cave. But once the ship is in space, they know they're in space. I'm like, did you not grab the hypo spray with the juice, but you didn't grab a fucking comm unit? Because then they could have just,
No,
Open it up,
we
call the
needed
ship.
a scene with the
Beam me up.
super soldier serum.
Well, sure, I get that.
Captain Rogers was there the whole time.
So
Jen.
if there's no shields, okay, so we say there's no shields. They couldn't scan for human life signs and beam them up. Because we can do that sometimes, but sometimes we can't.
Sometimes we can't. But there were already humans on, because remember, it's humans and Klingons.
Right. So fail safe, beam every human off that ship.
You would think.
But instead, Spock's just got to have this dramatic moment where he has to order the love of his life right now.
Yeah, for the moment.
to death by blowing up the ship.
Because now Spock has had 2 loves.
Yes, and I think there's probably more to come.
Probably.
I don't know. But yeah, I felt that whole thing was like, well, we've already established, like, okay, so they didn't have a comm unit. The ship probably doesn't have shields. They didn't scan for human life signs to try and pull them off the ship. Like, there were all these things they could have done.
101 different things that they should have done.
And they're just no, we're just going to destroy it because that's what the transponder said to do.
Well, you got to remember, Jen, that Spock is dealing with his emotions right now.
Yes.
So he emotionally was not capable of
That.
thinking
Now,
that.
that I can buy. The only option is to kill her. Okay. So this is my struggle as a writer because I see these like, well, can't you just do this? Well, can't you just do that? So it for me, writing stuff is very challenging because I see these outs and I'm like, well, why would you just do this then? But that's not very dramatic, or that doesn't add suspense, or it's like so that's the challenge in writing when you're a highly intellectual thinking person on those lines is that how do I write something that's convincing, that's not just a trope or
cliche. Oh my God, I can't tell you how many times I've had to rewrite a scene in one of my stories where I'm trying not to put a cliche or a trope in there, and I'm just like, this is so boring.
Yes. When it actually comes down to it, like most moments in life are really mundane, boring, and it's.
But that's not why we read or watch.
No, we want these things to suspend disbelief. But then if you're like a rational, intellectual person like me, then you're like, no, you can't do that because of this. Or why didn't you just do? It's a trap. Don't open the door.
But they open it anyway.
But you're gonna open the door. You just fucking open the door.
You're not wrong.
So I have to take a step back and look at the entirety of the episode. So I can nitpick did it have shields or not, and did they really need to steal the Enterprise, or could they just left? And they could have just left too. Spock could have just kidnapped the inspectors instead of stealing the ship.
But then you would have had they could have put in a whole we need to take the ship back to the space station.
Throw them in a brig. Lock them in the crew quarters or something. There's any number of things that could have been done. So I'm like, I really can't fault any. They made that choice for dramatic reasons. They made that choice to add suspense or action or drama or comedic relief to the story. But overall, I enjoyed watching the episode.
Oh, very much
I did not
so.
have a problem watching it twice.
No.
A lot of the newer stuff that comes out, I think once is enough. I'm not eager to go back and watch it again. But Strange New Worlds is and just again visually from the aesthetic, it's really pretty to watch. It's just
gorgeous.
So beautiful.
Even though the ship is older, they're making it look like the OG Starship Enterprise, which I love, but it makes it, they've done a really good job of making it sleek and sexy and pretty while maintaining the old aesthetic of the ship.
Yeah.
Which I'm really enjoying that factor. And they're also incorporating a new level of technology that obviously we couldn't incorporate, in the original series. So I'm really enjoying all of these beautiful images and designs while maintaining this older Starfleet feel.
Yes. And then towards the end of season 2 of Discovery, the Pike says something about taking out all of the holo emitters or the holo projections for the comms, which is why he talks on the screen. But in Discovery, they have holo projections on all the desks and stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
And that keeps the Enterprise more in line with the Enterprise that we see in the original series. And I really like that because I actually think the holo projection, the way they did it in Discovery, is very impractical.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, particularly when you look at the
To be
path
honest,
of the holographic journey.
to be honest, the holo emitters, I totally forgot Discovery had those.
Well, and they were terrible, and they were supposed to be because they're supposed to be like first generation kind of
Yeah.
things, newest technology, and it's really confusing. And like I know they did it because they can. It's a visual effect that they can pull off now that they couldn't pull off back then.
Yeah.
But sometimes just because you can do a thing
Doesn't mean you should.
does not mean you should do a thing. And it's not practical, like in small confined spaces, to have a 3D projection when a 2D one will do just fine.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes a 2D screen is really all you need. You know, and in my sci-fi universe, I use 2D and 3D interchangeably depending on the needs of the space. So there's a line in the opening, "Never start a fight you can't win." I'm not sure I agree with that sentiment. Sometimes a fight needs to be fought, win or lose.
Yeah.
So when she says never start a fight you can't win, of course his response is you didn't start this one. So they're gonna finish it. But
and the whole Boy Scout thing, I'm like, I get it, because Boy Scouts are supposed to be goody goodies. I'm just letting all y'all know I'm a Boy Scout, or was a Boy Scout. Obviously, I'm not a Boy Scout anymore.
You're not Scouts for life?
I'm an Eagle Scout.
Okay.
Eagle Scouts are for life. But in Boy Scouts,
So you're not a boy anymore.
not for some time. In Boy Scouts, there were all sorts of kids. Like you're not a goody, stuck nose up in the air kind of person just because you're a Boy Scout. So personally, kind of irritates me. I get it because in society, Boy Scouts are looked upon as like, I'm going to help this little old lady across the street, which I have done. And we're supposed to do a good turn daily and all that jazz, but come on. I was a little bit of a rebel.
Well, it does bring up, this is 23rd century, and we already have like integrated scouts. They're not Boy Scouts anymore. They're just scouts.
Scouts, yeah.
So one would think that vernacular would have died.
Oh, speaking of vernacular, Ortega says pedal to the metal.
I would not think vehicles would use pedals anymore.
No.
I think everything is automated, so there's like, how do you move this thing?
And speaking of like the pedal to the metal, and why is it that all the starships have buttons? Like, what happened to the tactile things, joysticks and throttles and
something that gives you some sort of haptic feedback?
Yeah,
even if it's false. Yeah. Okay. The only thing I can think of is that it was in one of the Star Trek movies. I think it might have been Insurrection, where Riker actually, like, this joystick comes up and he grabs it. It's very strange looking.
Yes.
But he takes, like, manual control of the ship and he's flying it with a joystick.
that was ridiculous. Okay, that was ridiculous. But I think that was because that was designed to be ridiculous.
And Tom Paris in Voyager, when he does the Delta Flyer, he says he wants tactile interfaces so he can have a feel of the ship.
Which they talked about in designing the ship. They do that on purpose. So and when he flies the ship, it's awesome. It looks like he's flying a ship instead of sitting at a desk.
Yeah, the lack of haptic feedback and the inability of the operator to have a sense of what the vehicle is doing in the space around it. Like, I get that there is no real feedback because of inertial dampeners and shields and this, that, and the other thing. You actually don't feel anything, but you can simulate the feeling of gravity and whatnot on control mechanisms so that an operator knows when
especially in the 23rd century, you have to have the technology to do that.
You're
literally flying through space.
You can give that feedback to the operator so they have a sense of what the vehicle is doing, because I think that's how you fly, that's how you operate. At least that's how we do it. Now, maybe by then they're so in tune to screens and buttons. You look at the Dragon capsule that SpaceX uses to go back and forth between the International Space Station, and they don't have tactile controls. The Dragon is even when NASA astronauts are on board, it's all touchscreen.
Yeah.
And that scares the crap out of me as someone who's an operator who's used to opening valves and pushing buttons and switches on machinery to like.
Because what if the screen cracks
and the
now you
screen
can't
cracks
see anything?
and crap.
Yeah.
You just plug it
I mean,
in.
not to mention if the system crashes.
Right.
But the screen cracking in one little corner, the whole screen is done.
Yeah. So that lack of control would bother me quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
So and we know in Star Trek those consoles have like explosives behind them. So that they will blow up when the ship is hit for no reason. They don't just wink out.
No,
like they don't
it
just
has to
lose power.
explode.
It has to explode. The power conduit that's feeding the juices to those light up displays has to be massive and throwing rocks.
Yeah. There's always rocks being thrown into your face.
Maybe take the rocks out. I can see that as a comedic element to do in a spoof show. Like, what are you doing? I'm loading rocks into the console so that when it explodes during battle, you get rocks in your face. Why would you do that? Because it looks cool.
But again, overall, this episode I thought was absolutely fantastic. I think it really does set up for a good season. And I liked Discovery in the sense that it had a goal from beginning to end with each season. I know you're not really a big fan of that. I do like the...
Oh, no, I like seasonal arcs.
Yeah.
I do. I absolutely do. They just, when they came up with Strange New Worlds, they were trying to steer away from that so that you could jump in at any time without having to know a bunch of backstory.
Well, I think that they're going to still do that with this season, but they are going to have something in the background. They might not have it every episode, but I'm sure that they'll have like 5 minutes here or something like that. You know, they might send a information dump to Pike and he'll get some report and they'll have to head towards the Gorn ship or something like that. So I'm sure that we'll have... Each episode will be its own unique episode, but we're going to have that arc throughout the season, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I am too. And if a show's going to have an arc, I would love it for Strange New Worlds to have a bit of that arc, you know, where you see more character development as the season progresses and the series progresses. It's the pendulum has gone too far the other way, and you look at Star Trek Discovery, you can't just watch any episode at any point in Star Trek Discovery without having to have this massive depth of backstory knowledge.
True.
To jump into it. And even the opening trailers, like a minute or 2 minutes of previously on, only tells you so much. There's
so much depth into what happened in that season or in that episode.
And when you have your story set up like that, particularly with Star Trek that's known for being progressive and making a social commentary, it's hard to then write something for the moment of what's going on today because you have this completely detailed scripted arc that you have to follow. You can't just take a minute and do an episode on X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't fit into the arc. And if you try to do that, it pulls you so far out of the arc story that you're like, what am I watching?
So jarring.
And that was the idea behind Strange New Worlds, is that you could, if something happens in the world or in politics or something that they want to comment on in a Star Trek way, they have a show that allows them to do that. They can write an episode that shines a light in a unique way on it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell us what you think about the episode. You know, let us know your thoughts. If you have any questions for us, please write those down too. But yeah, I think that episode was great, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter.
We'll see you next time.